Welcome to episode 70 of the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I am your host and co-founder, Aaron Breitman, coming to you on Friday, May 12th. We made it through the week. This is the first week of myself doing daily podcasts. I hope you've enjoyed it, and it's been fun, and I look forward to keeping it going. So plan is I won't really do anything on the weekends right now unless some breaking news happens. Obviously, during the school year, during the season, both for football and basketball, there'll be so much going on. I do plan to do pretty much every day. But for now, going into the summer, we'll see what happens. We'll take it as it goes. But wanted to wait a little bit on Friday. Obviously, Thursday was a big news day in terms of just waiting around with the transfer portal. So wanted to discuss that and really touch on a few other things with Rutgers men's basketball. And really first, just the fact that, this has been a thrilling kind of different offseason, just in the sense of for college basketball in general, right? Just because of the transfer portal, NIL, and just the nature of everything. Now, some people hate it. It's certainly different. But my kind of take on it is that we're all on the edge of our seats about Rutgers men's basketball in May. And I don't really know how that's a bad thing. So that excites me. There's genuine interest in the program. There's reasons to be hopeful and excited about the program. And getting through this transfer portal deadline is certainly a positive. Now, just to clarify what that means, Thursday was the deadline to enter the transfer portal to then be eligible to play next season with the one-time sit-out exemption, right? So if you're transferring for the first time, if you entered the portal by yesterday, May 11th, you can transfer anywhere you want and play right away next season. If you missed the deadline, if you have not entered the portal yet, and you enter the portal today, you would, by rule, have to then sit out next season. You're not losing eligibility, but you have to sit out next season. Now, there are exemptions you can file for waiver with the NCAA, varying reasons that people do it. Sometimes it's, being closer to home because there's a family issue. There's even, mental health issues now. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. So I support anyone in that battle. And we all have, I think, varying battles, throughout our lives with all kinds of stressors. And everyone goes through things that you don't know about. So I guess this is my quick little moment of just being respectful to everyone. And that also, I guess I'm going to apply that to college basketball. It's easy to judge these kids from wanting to make certain decisions, but there's a lot that goes on that none of us know about, in terms of what they hear, what they're promised, what is real, what's not. And I think at the end of the day, we just have to respect everyone in terms of their right to do what's best for them and the program to do what's best for them. And I think that we're very fortunate to have Steve Pikiell as the head coach at Rutgers because, I don't know if you saw the article on the USA Today network on last Sunday, but it was talking about his family and how his kind of family philosophy with his own kids in terms of playing competitive sports, how refreshing it was, in terms of not overdoing it at a young age, having balanced lives. And I think that he applies all those principles to how he runs the program. And, I've talked to a lot of players over the years and, listen, not everyone is going to agree with their head coach, right? Or love their head coach per se, but every single player I've ever talked to has the utmost respect for him. And pretty much, I think a large majority generally like him and enjoyed playing for him. Obviously, playing time is going to be part of that, right? I think the only grips I've ever heard about people that haven't is playing time, and they end up going on to places they can. And that is why the transfer portal is important, for players that want to seek out other opportunities. So that's a positive. So Rutgers got through that deadline where every player on the roster that wants to play next season is locked in unless they're willing to risk sitting out or trying to get this waiver, right? So I would say the roster at this point is solidified in that regard. Now, it does not apply to grad transfers. Grad transfers can still enter the portal at any time. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that. We know Andre Hyatt and Cam Spencer are back. We don't know if Paul Mulcahy is back, but that's for other reasons in terms of him exploring options outside of college, is my understanding. So we're waiting on Cliff Omoruyi and Paul Mulcahy. We know that right now Rutgers has in the front court Mawat Mag, who's recovering from the torn ACL injury. A lot of speculation there. He's back. He did not enter the transfer portal. Antoine Woolfolk is back. So we have those two in the front court. Then you have Gavin Griffiths, top 40 recruit, who I wrote about this week, at the wing. Andre Hyatt's back. He has versatility. He could play the 3 or the 4. You have Antonio Troll, who's a bit of a project, who the staff's really high on. And then you have a backcourt that includes Noah Fernandes, the transfer from UMass, Cam Spencer, who had the best offensive season of any Pikiell player since he's arrived at Rutgers. And then you have Derek Simpson year 2. JaMychal Davis is still expected to sign. You're waiting on Mulcahy and Omoruyi. Let's say both of them return. You still have 2 open scholarships for next season. So I think, and I got a reply on Twitter today. Someone says, and I appreciate the reply, but it was basically being nervous that we haven't heard much on the portal front in terms of players that Rutgers is pursuing. I wouldn't be worried about that. It's there's hurdles throughout the offseason, and I think as we've learned this offseason, things are adapting and changing daily, and I think that Pikiell is adjusting and adapting to that. They already getting Noah Fernandes early on was huge. And that was, I think, a major priority in terms of getting a ball handler, getting another player that can create on offense. They got that accomplished pretty quickly. Now it was about retention, keeping the roster core intact. Now that deadline's passed, now you're waiting on Cliff and Paul. Cliff is going to participate along with Caleb McConnell, who's since departed based on eligibility, at the NBA G League Elite Camp, which is a 2-day combine on Saturday and Sunday. And then if he's a top performer, he could get invited to the NBA Draft Combine, which takes place next week, starting on Monday. So we'll have some more clarity there. I think realistically, just from a statistical point of view, if you're not invited to the NFL Draft Combine, or NBA Draft Combine, the odds of you getting drafted are pretty close to 0. So we'll have to see. Again, NBA isn't the only pro options. There's overseas, there's the G League. So still wait and see on Cliff. He has until May 31st to decide whether he stays in the draft or he withdraws as an early entrant and returns to Rutgers. Also, Paul Mulcahy is under the same timeline. Now, he is not getting the same type of interest from the NBA and G League that Omoruyi is, but it still gives him time to weigh all of his decisions. I do think if Paul comes back, he's going to play a huge role, and I still don't understand the pushback and the kind of negative comments by some fans that, they hope he moves on. Why? Yes, he did not play his best at the end of last year. He was obviously hurt. He lost confidence. A lot of things happened. But he's done a lot of good in his career at Rutgers. And I think the other thing that happened was that he's someone that cares immensely, and he took on a lot, to heart, but also just, I think he took on maybe too much responsibility, even in his own head. And having someone like Noah Fernandes on the team, having Gavin Griffiths, another shooter to go with Spencer, having Derek Simpson farther along in his development, these are all positives. And I think that they can all help Paul be a better player. Obviously, he needs to be healthy. So if he returns, I still expect him to play a huge role and be on the ball, a good part. He's 4th all time in assists. He's a point guard. That's how Pikiell looks at him. Could he deviate his role? Could he play off the ball more? Could he be more of a point forward? I think all those are possible. But I don't think he's going to be asked to do some completely different role than he's ever done before. If he comes back, you have a backcourt that's very experienced, talented, diverse, and versatile in their skill sets. Would be really excited about that. Cliff obviously really improved his defense this last year, an elite rim defender now. made all Big Ten defensive team, made second team all Big Ten. He has some offensive work to do. He's much better in space. He's not a true post-up guy. He doesn't have a ton of range, but he's athletic as anyone in college basketball. And I think when you have more perimeter scorers, when you have more guys that can create offense off the dribble, that's going to help Cliff Omoruyi. So I think it's a great situation for him to come back. Again, it's his decision, but getting both of those guys back would be a massive development for Rutgers. So we'll see what happens there. We have till May 31st to really know. So another almost 3 weeks. JaMychal Davis, like I mentioned, he's still expected to sign. He is the high school teammate and longtime friend of five-star Ace Bailey, who's committed to the 2024 class. Davis is expected to sign with the 2023 class, and everything that I'm hearing is still on course for that. So if all of that happens, that leaves 2 scholarships available for the 2023-2024 season. What will Rutgers do? Obviously, they need to go into the transfer portal. Like I said, there's lots of options still. There's no reason to panic. And I think that people need to appreciate that Pikiell is very methodical in how he approaches things. He isn't necessarily deliberate or hesitant to be that. He does that when he thinks it's the right thing to do. And Noah Fernandez was a guy they identified very quickly, and they pounced. They got him on campus, and he had other scheduled visits, and they closed him out before he could continue his visits. Very similar to how they got Cam Spencer the year before. So I think now what you're seeing is Rutgers needed to wait on a few things. They needed to see how the roster shook up after the portal deadline. They still need to wait and see, if Cliff comes back. If Cliff comes back versus Cliff leaving, the opportunity they have to pitch on the open market in the transfer portal is very different. It's very different. And I wrote about the roster in more detail today. Articles up on the scarletfaithful.com talking about in terms of, I do think there's versatility with the roster right now in terms of, Antoine Woolfolk, Andre Hyatt, and Mawot Mag, in terms of how you shift them around based on who else you have. If Cliff is gone, does Wolf potentially could move into that starting 5 spot and you get a backup? Or do you go get a starting big? Or does Hyatt shift down to the 4 when Mag is hurt and you prioritize another 4? Or do you plan on Hyatt and Mag manning down the 4 and you get another wing to go along with the inexperience of Griffiths and Chol? There's a lot of different directions they could go. I do think more so than not, they're going to, they have 11 spots. They have 2 open. In past years, Pikiell has not filled all the scholarships. I think that his eyes are open after last season, realizing that depth was an issue. I think also the climate has changed in terms of the transfer portal. Players are leaving year after year. So the idea that, in terms of keeping people happy, I think that's yes, there's a control in that as the leader of your program, but I also think there's factors that go into that are out of your control. And we've seen, I think Rutgers fans should be appreciative of how many key players are set to return now. There's programs that, lost almost everyone that are completely rebuilding, that had 1 or 2 scholarship players returning. That's it. So I do think, though, that that's going to play a part in how Pikiell's approaching the roster, and that I think he'll fill all the scholarship spots. You're going to have people transfer year after year now. That's just part of the reality. So doing something to try to prevent that by keeping everybody happy, by keeping an open scholarship, and I do love how he gives it to walk-ons. But at the same time, the Big Ten is the Big Ten. This is Power 5 basketball. You need every roster spot, I think, available from a depth perspective. So I think, especially with Mag's injury, we know he's going to return at some point. We don't know the exact timetable. We don't know if he's going to be ready at the start of the season. We don't know if it's going to be December. We don't know. And I'm sure nobody knows at this point. It's still too early in his recovery process. But there's no reason to believe he won't be fully recovered and be a contributor at some point next season. But does that play into how they build the roster from here? So I do think, a 4 and a 5 makes a lot of sense. If especially if Mulcahy returns, your backcourt set. You want to get Griffiths a lot of time. You have Hyatt. Like I said, you could potentially shift depending on what options are available. Maybe they do want to shift Hyatt to the 4 and they go out and get a wing if they like those options better. But I think most likely they'll stick with a 4 and a 5. You get a backup 5. You get a backup 5 if Cliff returns. Wolf is able to play both positions, and then you see about the 4 as well. But you need depth there. You need depth. But if Cliff leaves, then yeah, you have a starting 5 position to sell. Sells the wrong word. Market opportunity, and it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. But I do think that there's quality options out there. Of course, there's players that are already gone that I wish Rutgers had a chance to get, but there's nothing they could have done. You have to let the offseason play out. You have to let it all be a process, and that's what it is. And there's other things at task now. You have an assistant coach opening still that Rutgers has to figure out. And I'm sure now that the portal deadline has passed, Pikiell will reprioritize that position. And then also you have another staff fill now. Tom Barrett, the director of external operations, has left. It was reported by Jeff Goodman yesterday that he went back to Sacred Heart. Head coach is Anthony Latina, actually a good friend of Pikiell. I mentioned him as a potential assistant coach option earlier this offseason, but appears he's going to stay at Sacred Heart, and he actually brought Barrett back as an assistant coach. So Barrett was director of external operations. My understanding is that he had a lot to do with analytics and things like that. So that role is open, or if it will be the same role and then shift into something else, who knows? But there's now 2 staff open positions. That's something to watch for as well. So it's an interesting offseason. It's a fascinating offseason. It's an exciting offseason. I still think Rutgers is well positioned to have an even better season than last year and get back to the NCAA tournament. The Big Ten, I think, is going to be pretty wide open. And I think how, the next 6 weeks go for Rutgers in terms of the additions to the program that Pikiell makes, both on the staff level and on the roster, are huge towards doing that. So it's an exciting time. I appreciate everyone following my coverage, watching these videos, listening to the podcast, and also reading all my coverage. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll be back soon, and continue to follow scarletfaithful.com all weekend, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.